Prime Minister, is it important that politicians stick to their word?
Yes, it is important that politicians stick to their word. They have to make decisions against a difficult backdrop. We've obviously got big decisions to make in the budget that's coming in just a few days' time.
So I've got your manifesto here. Will you keep your word not to increase taxes on working people? It's on page 21 in this document.
Well, we made that commitment, and obviously we'll lay out our plans at the budget, which is just a few days away now, so you'll be able to see exactly what decisions we've made. Now, obviously, we make those decisions against a very difficult backdrop. We had the 2008 crash, where people haven't felt much better off since then. We then had austerity for a number of years, which destroyed our public services. Then had a botched Brexit deal, which damaged our economy, and then then COVID and the conflict in Ukraine. But we will make. It's very important that we take the right decisions for our country. I'm optimistic about the future of this country. Absolutely.
In the carefully orchestrated theater of budget preparation, where chancellors present themselves as making agonizing decisions between competing priorities, where every tax increase is justified as unavoidable necessity to fund essential services, and where working people are told they must accept higher tax burdens because there is simply no alternative way to balance the books or to repair public finances damaged by years of conservative mismanagement, the Center for Social Justice has exposed what may be the single most damning revelation about Rachel Reeves's economic strategy and about Labour's fundamental priorities. Last week, the Center for Social Justice revealed that the government's decision to abandon reform of Britain's broken welfare system will cost taxpayers over £25 billion a year, which is almost exactly the same amount of money that Rachel Reeves has reportedly been at pains to find in order to fill the black hole in next week's budget. That staggering sum, that £25 billion that disappears annually into spiraling health benefits whilst Reeves prepares to raise taxes on working people, perhaps even breaking manifesto commitments, represents not economic necessity but political choice, a deliberate calculation that it is easier to tax alarm clock Britain than to confront Labour backbenchers who delighted in this summer's welfare U-turn that stunned officials across Whitehall. Welcome to UK Bulletin Report, where we expose the truth about how every single taxpayer will be shelling out an extra £700 to fund the rising sickness benefit bill before even accounting for the potential £3 billion cost of scrapping the two-child limit on benefits, and how official data suggests that welfare is locking more people out of work than at any point in modern history, with claimants with no requirement to work having almost doubled since the pandemic. Subscribe now for daily analysis that refuses to accept that raising taxes on working people whilst abandoning welfare reform that could save £25 billion constitutes serious economic policy, and that insists the failure to make progress on welfare reform is counted not just in extra billions of spending but more tragically in the loss of human potential, as almost 1 million young adults languish outside education, employment, or training while spending on working-age benefits. Stands £20 billion higher in real terms than in 2020. The scale of the £25 billion figure deserves emphasis because it transforms the entire budget narrative from story about unavoidable difficult decisions into story about political choices that prioritize internal Labour Party management over the interests of working people who will pay for those choices. £25 billion per year is not marginal amount that represents rounding error in government accounts or that constitutes unavoidable cost of maintaining essential safety net. This is enormous sum that represents substantial portion of total government spending that exceeds the entire budgets of multiple government departments, and that is almost exactly equivalent to the black hole that Reeves claims she must fill through tax increases on working people. The mathematical coincidence is so precise that it exposes the fundamental dishonesty of Labour's budget framing. There is no necessity to raise taxes if the Chancellor were willing to reform welfare system. The choice to raise taxes rather than to reform welfare is political calculation, not economic imperative. Consider what £25 billion could achieve if it were not disappearing into broken welfare system. Had ministers adopted path to keep spiraling health benefits at today's already elevated level rather than allowing them to continue their inexorable upward trajectory, the Chancellor could have been preparing to cut income tax, putting money back into pockets of working families who are struggling with cost of living crisis that Labour promised to address but has only worsened. She could have put more money into NHS care, addressing the waiting lists and service deterioration that Labour campaigned on and that voters expected them to fix.
She could have increased defense spending at a time when international security situation grows more dangerous and when Britain's military capabilities have been hollowed out by years of underinvestment. Or she could have paid down some of Britain's colossal debt pile, reducing the interest burden that consumes ever larger share of government spending, and that constrains future fiscal flexibility. Instead, she is on course to raise taxes on working people, perhaps even breaking manifesto commitment that Labour will not increase taxes on working people, all just to stand still whilst welfare spending spirals out of control, and whilst the fundamental dysfunction of the system remains unaddressed.
The calculation that every single taxpayer will be shelling out an extra £700 to fund the rising sickness benefit bill transforms abstract discussion about billions into concrete impact on individual households. This is not distant policy debate about government budgets measured in incomprehensible sums. This is £700 per taxpayer, money that represents a substantial portion of monthly income for many families, money that could have been spent on mortgages, on energy bills, on food, on children's education, on any of the countless expenses that working families face. Instead, that £700 is extracted through taxation to fund welfare system that is failing both the taxpayers who fund it and the claimants who become trapped in dependency rather than being helped into productive employment. And that £700 per taxpayer is before taking into account the potential £3 billion cost of scrapping the two-child limit on benefits, which represents another political concession to Labour backbenchers that will add further burden to working families who are already being asked to pay more whilst receiving less. The characterization of demanding that alarm clock Britain stumps up ever more in tax whilst welfare budgets soar as brave political gamble, invoking Yes Minister's famous euphemism for politically suicidal decisions, captures the electoral danger that Reeves is courting through her budget choices. Alarm clock Britain refers to working people who set their alarms early, who commute to jobs that may not be glamorous but that they attend faithfully, who pay their taxes without complaint, and who expect that their hard work will be rewarded rather than punished through ever higher tax burdens. These are exactly the people who feel most acutely the injustice of paying more to fund welfare system that allows increasing numbers to claim health benefits without requirement to work, that traps young people in dependency rather than helping them into employment, and that costs more each year whilst delivering worse outcomes. When you tell these people that they must accept higher taxes not to fund better services or to reduce debt, but simply to maintain welfare spending at levels that continue increasing, you create conditions for electoral backlash that could destroy Labour's majority despite its current parliamentary dominance. The explanation that Labour's decision to abandon welfare reform is only truly intelligible when viewed through prism of internal Labour politics exposes the cynical calculation at the heart of Reeves's budget strategy. This was political decision driven by internal Labour Party dynamics, by the power of backbenchers who oppose any measures that could be characterized as cuts to welfare, and by calculations about what is necessary to maintain party unity regardless of economic cost or human consequences. This was not decision driven by economic analysis suggesting that welfare reform is impossible or impractical, nor by evidence that maintaining current trajectory represents optimal policy for either taxpayers or claimants. The reference to this summer's concessions on welfare, which stunned officials watching on across Whitehall but delighted Labour backbenchers as the U-turn was confirmed in real time in the House of Commons, reveals the process through which economic policy is being subordinated to internal party management and through which the interests of working taxpayers are sacrificed to appease backbench rebellion. When civil servants across Whitehall are stunned by policy decisions whilst Labour backbenchers are delighted, you know with absolute certainty that political considerations have overridden economic rationality and that competent governance has been sacrificed on altar of party management. Civil servants advising on welfare policy understand the costs of current system, the potential savings from reform, the evidence about what helps claimants into employment, and the fiscal sustainability challenges that unreformed welfare creates. They would not be stunned by decision to maintain reform trajectory that previous government had established and that makes economic sense based on evidence. They are stunned because political imperatives have produced decision that contradicts everything they know about effective welfare policy, and that will cost taxpayers £25 billion annually whilst trapping hundreds of thousands in dependency. Meanwhile, Labour backbenchers are delighted precisely because they have successfully pressured leadership to abandon economically necessary reforms in favor of maintaining welfare spending that benefits their political constituencies and their ideological commitments regardless of economic consequences or human costs.
The observation that whilst failure to make progress on welfare reform this year is counted in extra billions of spending, it is more tragically counted in the loss of human potential, elevates discussion beyond mere fiscal arithmetic to fundamental questions about what welfare system should achieve and about what government owes to those it claims to help. The purpose of welfare should be to provide temporary support to those who genuinely need it, whilst actively helping them return to productive employment that gives their lives structure, purpose, meaning, and dignity. When welfare system instead traps people in dependency, when it locks them out of work through perverse incentives and inadequate support for return to employment, when it destroys their potential by consigning them to lives on benefits rather than lives of contribution and achievement, it fails both economically and morally. The billions in spending are waste of taxpayer money, but the wasted human potential, the lives diminished by dependency, the contributions never made, the achievements never realized, these constitute tragedy that statistics cannot fully capture and that should shame everyone responsible for maintaining a system that produces these outcomes. The slender hope that the Chancellor will pull rabbit out of hat in shape of plan to put welfare reform back on the table and to help British youngsters into work who have been neglected for too long by multiple governments represents optimism that seems forlorn given the political dynamics that produced this summer's U-turn. If Reeves were going to prioritize welfare reform over internal party management, if she possessed the political courage to confront backbenchers and to make case for reform based on evidence and on interests of both taxpayers and claimants, she would have done so already rather than making concessions that stunned Whitehall officials and that cost £25 billion annually. The likelihood that she will reverse course in next week's budget and announce comprehensive welfare reform seems minimal, which means that the £25 billion cost will continue mounting year after year, whilst working people pay higher taxes to fund a system that destroys rather than develops human potential.